Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, October 7th. If you are, we have a big show for you today. Wild weekend in college football. Huge upsets all across the board. The number 1 team in the nation, the number 4 team in the nation, the number 9 team in the nation, nearly the number 8 team in the nation, the number 10, the number 11, the number 22. So many college football powerhouses, top-ranked teams went down this weekend. It was chaos. We're going to talk about all of that, where it leaves us in the state of college football about halfway through the season now, as well as taking a look at some of the NLDS series in baseball. And, of course, the NFL Week 6, previewing Monday Night Football as well. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or, if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, October 7th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit of college football. Crazy Saturday. Definitely the wildest one of the season so far. It was supposed to be the tamest one. This was supposed to be the apple-picking weekend, you know? You go out, there's only one top 25 matchup. Great matchup, by the way. Mizzou falls at the hands of Texas A&M. Texas A&M absolutely dismantles Mizzou. Reminds everyone that they are, in fact, for real teetering on the edge of being a good or a bad team. Mizzou takes a big tumble there, losing 41-10. You can't do that if you are Mizzou, a team that was already struggling a little bit. They had found ways to win, but they had lost a lot. They had lost a lot of their, I guess, prestige coming into this game. They had almost lost to Vandy, who, that's the headliner there, right? Vandy takes out Alabama, the number 1 team in the nation, 1 week after Alabama takes out Georgia, who came in as one of the best teams in the nation. That was a wild win. Vanderbilt's first win versus an AP top 5 opponent in their program history. They came in 0-60, now 1-60. Diego Pavia, I mean, this Vandy team, they just play everybody close. And that is an incredible skill to have. This is a embarrassing loss if you're Alabama. Already so many people, after praising Kalen DeBoer after week 1, after the Georgia win last week, they've completely turned tables on him. You lose to Vandy, you lose all that respect you've just gotten for beating Kirby Smart in Georgia. That is an insane victory. Obviously, Vandy always has been, for the longest time, the punching bag of the SEC, the punching bag for these top teams like Alabama. Now they lose here. And it's turned the entire college football world upside down. I know when we're looking at top 25 rankings, the AP came out, and it's a bit of an interesting list, right? I know when I was making mine, it'll be up tomorrow, we'll be going over that. It was weird because of everything that happened. 4 top 10 teams losing, a 5 top 15 teams losing, 6 top 25 teams losing, only one of those teams losing to a ranked opponent. This was a wild week in college football, and it's almost impossible, I think, to get a perfect ranking. But you take a look at where it is. Starting off in Alabama, I mean, the AP poll has them ahead of Georgia, right? The AP poll has them, behind Georgia, which head-to-head, it gets a little dicey here. But now that you've played 6 games, you have to start looking at the full resume, and I know some people don't like that argument. It's an interesting one. Chaos happened this week. But getting back to that game, Vanderbilt played great football. This wasn't a thing of Alabama beating itself. Vanderbilt came in, and they actually deserved to win this game. There's lots of upsets that you can talk about all the time. Plenty happened this week where you can say, hey, the team that got upset, they beat themselves. They didn't get beat. They beat themselves. Vanderbilt beat Alabama. Obviously, all the fun of carrying their goalpost down Broadway to the river, throwing it in, it's crazy to see. But Alabama wasn't the only SEC school to fall. Number 4, Tennessee also takes a bit of a tumble here. Tennessee falls to Arkansas. And Arkansas is a team that, when you talk about chaos, as this week has been, it only makes sense that Arkansas was in the middle of it. When you take a look at Arkansas's team, Arkansas is a team that, in my opinion, when I take a look at them, they turn the football field into some kind of dimension where nobody knows how to play good football. Doesn't matter who they're up against. Most of the time, they end up blowing it. Games like the Oklahoma State game. In this game against Tennessee, they end up finding a way to win here at the end. They make Nico Iamvaleta forget all awareness, running with 5 seconds left in the red zone instead of throwing it to a receiver down the field, ending the game. Obviously, that's not the only reason they lose. Arkansas, with their backup quarterback, comes in, has a great second half. They were down 14-3 in that second half. They come all the way back. It was just a great game by the Razorbacks. It was a job-saving win for the Razorbacks, for their coach there. This is, I mean, honestly, this is one of the craziest days in the history of college football, and it puts us at a spot, especially with this 12-team college football playoff, where I don't know how this is going to affect things. Obviously, this is a new year. You have a new system. You, instead of having a top 4, which this almost definitely would have killed the seasons for all of those teams that lost. But now that they have that 12-team playoff, now that this 12-team playoff is a thing, they all still feel like they have a chance. And I've heard, again, there's been a lot of arguments in the past couple of years about whether or not this 12-team playoff really is the best system, whether or not it should have been used, should have been implemented. But you get to see something like this where there is going to be the ability, there is going to be the option for a recovery for a team like in Alabama after losing 1 week. They still played solid, I thought. The defense is an issue. We've seen the defense now basically 6 straight quarters kind of fold in on itself, which is an issue, and they need to get that fixed. But the offense was good, right? The offense was able to keep pace with this Vandy team, that I think was a little bit underrated. They took a good Virginia Tech team to overtime. They took a Mizzou team that was ranked in the top 10 to overtime. And then they just beat Alabama. This is a good Vandy team. It's not world beater, barn burner kind of team, but it is a good Vandy team. The entire SEC really is pretty solid. Top to bottom, there isn't really a team that I point at and I look and say, hey, this is going to be an easy win, which is going to be, again, chaotic, which is what we love to see in college sports, in college football. And I cannot wait to see how this affects the future of this sport. Obviously, the SEC is still going to be able to have its 1, 2, 3 top members, but with all these guys losing, instead of what we were staring down the barrel of 2 weeks ago with 6 SEC teams in the top 12 in the playoff as we stood then, now we're just looking at 2, 3, 4 SEC teams, and it's starting to balance out a little more. Very excited for this. Obviously, we had to wait till they got into the conference schedules, but craziness all over the board in college football. I cannot wait to talk about it. We'll be more on it tomorrow when we do our college football power rankings, our top 25 there for you. So make sure to tune in for that. But we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to turn our attention to the NFL. A wild weekend in the NFL as well. The Broncos win their 3rd straight. The Cardinals come back, beat the San Francisco 49ers. The Vikings are 5-0. We're going to talk about all of that and more coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, October 7th. If you are just tuning in, we just went over a lot of the college football craziness from last weekend. In this segment, we're going to take a look at the NFL, talk about all of the updates, where teams stand after another week of upsets in the NFL. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, October 7th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into some NFL here. Week 6 is all but over. Monday Night Football is tonight. We'll get into that later on in the show. But my biggest question, my biggest takeaway from this week, from week 5, are the Broncos good? Obviously, that defense has been really good. They've just won their 3rd game in a row, a huge feat for this Broncos team, one that started off looking awful, and they've done it against, well, not the greatest competition. I wouldn't necessarily say it was bad, right? They've beat the Bucs, a team that looks like it has a shot at the playoffs in its division, a good team. The Jets, who in theory are a good team, the play of Aaron Rodgers and the conditions of that game, it's a little tricky. And then the Raiders, a team that I would not consider to be a good team, but they have some pieces there. Obviously, there's no question that this Broncos defense has been playing phenomenal football. They're the reason they've won this game. Bo Nix is not coming in here and being the reason they win the game. But I talk about it all the time when I break down football, whether that be college or the pros. Turnovers matter, and Bo Nix has done a good job of not turning the ball over. Granted, it was against the Raiders. They benched Gardner Minshew. They didn't have their best weapon out there, but Pat Surtain is playing great football. You take a look at where the Broncos stand right now in their division, a division that outside of the Chiefs doesn't really seem to have a true clear-cut number 2. Maybe it's the Chargers, maybe it's the Broncos. The Broncos sit at 3-2, a winning record. Bo Nix and the Broncos have won 3 straight games, the first time a rookie for the Broncos has ever done that. The Chargers, 2-2. They're on a bye this week. We're really going to get to see who is that number 2 team, I guess, coming up next this week when they take on each other. The Broncos take on the Chargers, but the Broncos have been showing a lot, and I was really down on them. I've talked a lot about how I don't think Bo Nix is an NFL caliber starting quarterback, and I still believe that. I don't think Bo Nix has gone out and showed you, especially compared to a lot of the other rookie quarterbacks, the other 2 rookie quarterbacks that are starting right now in Caleb Williams, who continues to get better and better continues to get better and better every single week, as well as Jaden Daniels, who some people I've heard are throwing his name into the MVP conversation, which is crazy, but it's not that far off with how muddled the MVP race has been so far. It's still early in there, though. But you look at Bo Nix, and he's not nearly up there, but he's winning football games. 3-2, same record as the Bears, almost as good as the Commanders. And you say, hey, can the Broncos keep this up? With the way that their defense is playing, that's what's going to be the question. Their schedule isn't the worst in the league, right? We went over it in the preseason. They get the rest of their division. They get the Panthers later on in the schedule. They get the Browns, who have not played very good football. The Colts are kind of 50-50. This is a schedule that I could see them winning 5 more games, beating the Panthers, beating the Chargers once, maybe taking out the Raiders again, beating the Browns, maybe beating the Colts. This is a team that could potentially get a winning record this year. That's going to be pushing it. But still, this is a good Broncos team. And it's one that I severely underestimated here. And it's all because of that defense, all because of Pat Surtain. And Pat Surtain deserved that huge contract he got right before the season. Outside of the Broncos here, I do want to talk a little bit about the Commanders. Obviously, they have been one of the biggest stories of the NFL season. People expected the Commanders to be the same old Commanders. But Dan Quinn, Jaden Daniels, they look incredible. I've been kind of reserved on them for these last 2 weeks since his breakout. And I told you in the lead up to this game, if Jaden Daniels does it again, if Jaden Daniels shows me against what I think is at least a competent defense, one that can get some pressure, I'm on the bandwagon. And he did it again. He did some stuff that I was not ready to see out of a team in Washington that has not shown this kind of promise in my entire lifetime. This is crazy. Jaden Daniels is an awesome quarterback. He is the clear front runner for Rookie of the Year. And I don't think it's that crazy to put him into MVP conversations. We were having this conversation around CJ Stroud last year. Very similar situation. I don't think he's going to end up winning it, but it's definitely a conversation to be had. Speaking of CJ Stroud, though, how about that game between the Bills and the Texans? Stephon Diggs, obviously, in his revenge game, even though he forced his way out of Buffalo to get down to Houston. Stephon Diggs, not a huge game, not the worst game. Nico Collins goes down, but the big conversation around this game was the decision-making of the coaches down the stretch. Both DeMeco Ryans and both the Bills and the Texans head coaches made some interesting decisions. Sean McDermott, obviously, down the stretch, when he got the ball back, decided, hey, we're gonna throw for it, which I'm going to come out here and defend him a little bit. I thought that was the right move, at least in the beginning. The Texans have 3 timeouts. You're at your own goal line. They're going to be playing a lot of run heavy. The run game hadn't been super effective. Not much of your offense had been super effective. I think the lack of weapons really are starting to catch up to Josh Allen and that group. Especially, without Khalil Shakir, which shouldn't make that big a difference. It really shouldn't. Khalil Shakir is good. He's not carry your offense, cripple your offense without him bad, or good, I should say. But the Bills made that decision. Josh Allen, 3 incompletions. They punt it back. The Texans get it with 7 seconds left. It's like a 60-yard field goal, and it goes through because the kickers have been insane this year. Not just Kaimi Fairbairn, but Brandon Aubrey. Everyone else around the league just make 50-yarders look like chip shots half the time. I'm surprised when they miss more than when they make a 50, 60-yard kick anymore. It's crazy how that works. But Texans get the walk-off victory there. But on the Texans side, before the Bills got the ball back and made that decision when they went 3 and out, the Texans, with 3 timeouts there, in field goal range, decide to drop back to pass, and they end up getting a intentional grounding penalty. That intentional grounding penalty pushes them out of field goal range and sets up that whole situation for the Bills. So back to back kind of weird decisions from these coaches, and I don't expect the coaches to be perfect. Obviously, it worked out for DeMeco Ryans and the Texans there, but it's not going to work out every time. That's one of those things where, hey, I know worst comes to worst, you assume you're going to overtime, and overtime with both of these teams, I think would have been incredibly entertaining to watch. But it's a little bit concerning. It's a little bit concerning the way the Texans haven't really been able to put it all together. The Bills are starting to fall apart too. These are two teams that have been at the top of the NFL at the beginning of this season. I think it's starting to catch up to them. Some teams are starting to figure them out, and they need to change it up just a little bit to keep it going. But let me know if there are any games that you thought I should cover that I missed. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the NLDS, starting with the Phillies-Mets series. Two crazy games coming out of Philadelphia as they take a day break to go and switch the series over to New York. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube.
All about the NFL as well as the college football recap from earlier on in the weekend. In this segment, we're turning our attention to baseball. The MLB playoffs are underway. We had two crazy first two games to the NLDS in both series. We're going to talk about both of them in these next couple of segments, starting off with the Phillies and the Mets. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, October 7th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the MLB here just a little bit. The Mets and the Phillies in back-to-back games have done theater magic. In game one, the Mets 1 for 21 off of the starting pitching. Game two, in the eighth inning, bullpen comes in. Phillies are up 1-0. Their bats had been cold all day long just as well, but they were able to scratch across a run earlier on in the game. The Mets tear apart that Phillies bullpen, a Phillies bullpen that is much upgraded after the earlier on